Hi, Mayella, and it's great to talk to you again. What really blew my mind was there about a month ago, you were on with us and you talked about robustus and you talked about your medicine. You are a medicine woman, and as you say, you're the bridge between the indigenous and I believe this world medicine, which is needed at the minute. And I know that an awful lot of particularly the women that was on the community call that night, were really, really touched, and I think you opened them to something totally new. So you're welcome, and it's an honor to talk to you, darling. How are you?
Good morning, Paul. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to chat to you about anything and everything. You're so wise and so generous. I'm a big fan of you, Paul, so I'll give this back. This love you're sending this way, I send it back.
Okay. No, yeah, I'm a fan of yours too. I know you for quite a long time now, and we've done some work together, but you always come from the heart, and that to me is what the medicine is about, you know? So
Indeed.
if you trained with the indigenous in Mexico.
Yes, I've been very privileged to learn from a wide variety of teachers, Paul. And I think there is something that we could all agree with recent events in the world, is the need for modern society to have a look at the way things were done before, at the principles and the ethics that was the leading ways of thinking of native people in different cultures, and how much better our life could be if we adopted some of those principles and brought them to modern life in some way, shape, or form. So I have had more than teachers from urban areas. I've always had contact with native teachers. And I think more than ever before, we need those teachings brought into the cities, into the, let's call it the developed country, whatever way you want to call it, because they bring us, they give us things and they bring us back. To me, the way I describe it is that you feel at home, you feel more at peace with yourself when you approach things the way that native cultures do it, the original groups from different countries. And there's a wide variety of cultures we could be looking at here. But the beauty of it is also that the principles that are upheld by the Maya groups or the Lakota groups, they have so many things in common, right? The respect for the land, the connection to the ancestors. These are all common things that in modern life we have forgotten about. So being a bridge between these core knowledges for me is bringing the heart back into societies where we've lost the heart. We're much more about the intellect, about the financial gains, about ownership of the land and of anything we can think of. So look back at that and see, can that make me happier than owning stuff, for instance? And often it does, funnily enough.
No, you're right in what you say. I remember when I was doing training with one of my teachers, and I said to him one day when I was going through a pretty rough old time, I said to him, what's this all about? He said, finding out who you really are. And I believe when you say that, it's about bringing us back to them indigenous ways, our connection and not disconnection. Because that's why there's so much sickness and so much stuff, I believe, is because we're disconnected from the land, from our communities. And as you said, it's all about monetary, it's all about gain. Someday we're going to leave it behind anyway, you know. So yeah, I get what you're saying there. And when you talk about that, I remember one day I was at a spinologist, and he was doing the thing on my back, And he said, you know, this was very popular in Ireland 300 years ago. And I said, in what way? He said, when women had babies, a month after they had their baby, they used to go to the bone setter, and he would realign their body back to make the flow come again. But he said, and of course, medicine came in and it was being pushed out of the way. So in our tradition as well, there was old ways, and there was and it was kind of based within the community. People had that, but we've lost that, haven't we?
We have, Paul, and we have got used. We're a convenience society, so anything that is convenient, we do that. So take the pill or take the remedy. I'm not saying there's no place for medicine, you know, and science. For sure there is, but it's about understanding that perhaps our conception of wellness and health are very, very small and related to taking a pill or not taking a pill. Whereas indigenous cultures have an understanding of health and wellness that involve things like the community, like you mentioned, but also involve things like how the body is not just the physical body, how our physical ailments are related to many more parts of our body. We have many bodies, right? We have the emotional body, we have the mental body, and how these two can make disease come to our body. And in a society where there is so much violence, because there is violence, you know, we had International Women's Day not so long ago, and so many protests for violence against women. There's also violence against children and men worldwide. How do native cultures viewed of trauma and trauma, you know, a fragmenting of your emotional body, you know, and then some bits get lost somewhere, and the medicine woman, the healer, has to bring those bits. And you can think of a shaman or a medicine man or woman having a ritual or some sort of procedure to bring these parts of the soul that have been lost back to the body of the person, to bring healing, to bring a sense of wholeness. But the main picture that you're getting from there, beyond the technique, is the concept that we can break into pieces. And it sounds romantic, but it's actually very, very much what happens when trauma happens in our bodies. Say you have an accident or you have a great fright of some kind, you know, very bad news. In Mexico, we say we jump out of our bodies. Right? So we need to put that bit of our body, of ourselves, back into our physical bodies. So when we think about our whole composition as humans, beyond the physical part, there's a problem with my liver. You know, the Chinese will say, well, that's where you keep your frustrations. You know, traditional Chinese medicine. Then you can start looking at how emotions and many other areas of our life coincide into what we talk about when we talk about health or disease. So these concepts of traditional medicines will help us gain a much wider understanding of what do you mean when you are healthy. What do you mean when you say somebody's sick, and where did that come from? It's a lot more than a bacteria, isn't it?
I'd agree with you. When you're talking there, you remind me, I read a brilliant book on PSD, because I suffered PSD myself from my military days, but and of course, when I was going through it, I didn't understand it and didn't know what I had. But since then, I've been doing a lot of I'm aware of it and aware of different techniques. But this guy wrote a book, Tribe is the name of the book. He was a war correspondent, very, very good. But anyway, they were looking at how a lot of the indigenous people didn't really suffer post-traumatic stress as to where the people that went back into the white world. And there was a few very good points on it. And I can relate to some of this myself, and that when we came back out of the place we were, and what happened out there was kind of personal to a lot of us. But when we came back into the world, as they say, no one cared. You know, people we lost, about things that happened to us. So you kind of carried the traumas in internal, and you didn't you weren't allowed to express it, for example. But what happened with a lot of the indigenous people, when they came back from these situations, they sat with the tribe or with the community, and they shared their experiences. So what actually happened, the community took on their stuff and helped them collectively to heal. So with that act of stuff, they were able to integrate back into community again and leave what was in the past behind them, and not spend years going to getting tablets, and maybe fellas turn out to be alcoholics, drug guys, or whatever, trying to process this, which is I totally relate to what you're saying there, and that's beautiful. But
it's the power of the community and the circle, the talking circle, isn't it, that we've lost? It's so much more like it's become an individual race for my own benefit, and maybe I share it with my immediate family, my husband, my children. But I no longer gather in circle with my peers, whether it's a mixed group or a women's circle. They've become very popular, women's circles in particular, over the last few years. But it's so difficult to hold the circle, hold the space without the judgment, without making myself the main character in the stage. There is a lot to be said about holding a good circle. But again, there we have inspiration from indigenous cultures. How did they do that? They take turns with the pipe or the talking stick, right? And if you're holding the stick, that's your time to have your say.
No judgment.
With no judgment, that's right. Which comes naturally that these days, and sometimes out of perhaps a good place, we want to help, so we make a judgment as a way of proposing a change or a strategy for helping. But it's just becoming aware of what actually helps, and what actually helps most of the times is just listening.
Yes.
So just listening.
Yeah, I agree with you in that sometimes, what's coming to my mind there as well too, indigenous people will take time out to sit with people and to do the talking stick and to listen. Whereas in our community, people don't have time. And in a lot of things, when we do it, sometimes people can be judgmental instead of knowing that when they're part of that community and the person is sharing that as part of them, they're sharing as well. And I'm a big believer in that when we're doing as you said, the talking stick, when someone comes up and they're talking, I see it so often in shamanic circles, talking about their pain and their experience, but they're also telling that to someone else that needs to hear that. And it's kind of like a shared experience. And there's a teaching and a lesson in it for them, No, that's beautiful. What I really want to talk to you now about is the rebosis, because I had an amazing experience with you when you tied me in knots with the rebosa. It just blew me away, Mayella, in that I just think it's such a beautiful, beautiful healing, that sacred energy that you do with it, and the experiences I had. One of the lasting experiences I will never forget was when you were at my feet. It was how I loved to dance in another life, and my feet were totally cut off so that I couldn't dance anymore. And another one was where, of course, I was standing on a battlefield and I was the last soldier standing, and I was shouting at them to come. And Melly always had this fear in her, I think up to that point in time, that she was always going to lose me, because I believe we were together maybe 6-7 lifetimes. And I kept going to war. I never learned, and I kept not coming back. But absolutely amazing. I just think that's a medicine that's magical. And I thank you for it. Do you want to explain a bit about it?
You're very welcome, Paul. That is something that is still work in progress in a way, Paul, because I'm still discovering levels of depth of how it heals. And I have a PhD from a British university. I also have this thing coming to me where I want to understand things in
Yes,
some level as well as feel it when I'm
yes,
doing it. This is, of course, a technique that we use. A rebozo is a particular size, a larger size piece of cloth that we use to is mostly used for wrapping women after birth, after childbirth in Mexico, and is used by traditional Mexican midwives as a tool to help during birth itself, as a pain relief through massage and tightening of certain parts. So we tie certain parts of the body to aid the relief of pain during labor. And then after that, um, it's used to wrap the woman up, and we squeeze certain parts of the body as we tighten the piece of cloth along your body, because of this idea in traditional Mexican medicine that when a woman gives birth, um, uh, you literally are opening your body to bring this child into the world. But as you open your body physically, there's cold winds, they say, cold wind out in the world that will come into your body via this opening and take over it, and bring disease. It's beautiful because Chinese medicine also talks about a cold womb will not be a healthy womb. And I love the way these medicines coincide. So initially, I learned this from Angelina Martinez, whom you've met and love, as well
yeah,
as me, in the context of childbirth. And I saw the effect it had. I understood what it was meant to be doing was a little bit like the bone setting post-birth that you were talking about, through the squeezing of certain parts of the body, because of course all our ribs open up the rib cage to give space for this belly. So all this needs to be brought back, but miraculously, and yet not so, when you bring back the physical body, you squeeze it back to place, you're also closing memories, closing and squeezing stuff out, which is emotional, isn't it? It's
yes,
incredible because the body keeps the memories, and now science is catching up to indigenous concept of um, body memory. Now you have all these fancy somatics, this and trauma informed that. The indigenous peoples were talking about this long, long time ago. Now we have a scientific name for it. So our bodies keep memories in the cells, and as we give a loving massage to someone and we squeeze them in particular places, um, obviously the mother is in a place of vulnerability postpartum. They're very open emotionally, as anybody who has just experienced trauma, right? So I took the childbirth rebozo experience of the cerrada, we call it, means closing in Spanish, the cerrada for birth. I took it over and started doing it in the likes of you
yeah,
and other willing willing subjects, because I saw the potential, I saw the similarities between um, childbirth, um, the cold coming into your body, for instance, as you open to bring the baby, and also how we jump out of our body when we have this trauma experience and something takes over that space which was emptied. They explain it's like a way of um, protecting yourself. So you jump out to protect yourself from the traumatic experience, but this gap you left is filled with cold, with not so nice things. So the same as with childbirth, there is a space that has been emptied, or a space that has been filled with cold in every sense of the word, cold temperature and cold emotion, and that we need to lovingly squeeze that cold out
yeah,
physically. But as we do so physically, it happens emotionally. And if the person is in any way sensitive, like you will start to see that when we squeeze lovingly through the rebozo massage, we are actually shifting long held emotions as
Yeah.
well, long held memories, because they're all in here, right? In our
Yes.
bodies.
Yes.
So it's the beauty of, as a therapist, knowing the right balance between, do I need to open this person? Because with the rebozo, we open sometimes, for instance, if the mommy is not bonding with the baby very well for whatever reason, and there's many reasons, we may choose to open her heart rather than close it
Was it?
during this process to
Okay.
help her with that and to aid breastfeeding, for example. So there is a chat you need to have with your with the person, so you know what's going on and you get a feeling. Some points I may need to actually open, and some points I may need to close them, um, for the benefit of that person. So it's become an experiment in how many different ways this method can help you. So it helps with, grief after someone's death. There's an emptiness inside us. Literally, we feel it, where this can help you. And the magic in the objects we use,
Yeah.
because we decide that they're magic and because they're lovingly used. So we give a herbal bath, which is common to other cultures. We have the baños floridos from the Peruvian shamans. So we bathe the person in warmth. Again, this idea of bringing warmth back into a body that is cold physically and emotionally. And then we start squeezing, opening or closing as the case may be, in a cloth that has been lovingly made with all the loving intentions, by a family who makes a living out of this and knows that these clothes are bringing healing to people worldwide. So you support the local economy in
Yes.
Mexico. And the fact that you're supporting it brings more healing, more strength to your healing. You have their blessing and their power that infused in that cloth comes with you to the healing. So it becomes like you're not the only healer in the room. You
Yes.
have so many people with you there, aiding
Beautiful.
this process, that it's inevitable that will be amazing.
Yes. It's beautiful. No, that's beautiful. One thing that came up to me there, because I do come across it now and again myself, is sometimes when there's miscarriages, because
Mm,
sometimes there can be the memory of the trauma of the death in the womb.
yeah.
That would work for that.
It works for every type of trauma, really.
Okay.
Um, Anytime that you lose a job, you lose a house, you lose a partner, you lose a beloved pet. Um, but we also honor people through this ceremony. You know, it's one of the main objectives of the ceremony with uh, new mommies, because new mommies, everybody focuses on the beautiful new baby, but hardly anybody looks at the mother. And no, we equate in Mexico, women who've just given birth with warriors. We celebrate them as warriors. So there's
They are
parts of
warriors.
this, yeah,
Yeah.
there's part of the ceremony where we honor the woman, for what she's gone through. Now, it's natural to give birth, it's natural to be pregnant for women, but it doesn't mean that makes it easy. It's hard on your body, it's hard on every level of your bodies. So part of the ceremony is also honoring the effort that this woman has put into creating a new life. And the same can be applied. Do you feel not recognized? Do you feel like you've given so much and nobody has mentioned it? Well, we can honor you through a ceremony with the rebozo, because that's also one thing we can do with it.
Okay. No, it's beautiful because I'm sold on it, Mayella, because I've had the experience myself. It was one of the most
Mhm.
beautiful experiences that I've had, and I was really blown away because all the stuff I know there was more stuff that came. I forget a lot of it, but it was coming. It was all past life stuff. The other thing that really sold me on your medicine was the way that when Melanie was having Kai, our second child, I know that she wore the rebosa when she was pregnant to support the child in the womb. But and maybe you'll talk a little bit about that. But what really got really was very powerful for me, the experience was when Kai was to be born, and you talked about labor pains. So Alicia Flaherty, who's a good friend of ours and is a homeopath, was in with us at the birth. So every time Melly got the labor pains, we pulled the rebosa, we tightened it in around, and you know, it eased our pain and our experience. In that Kai was born within 3 hours or something, and he's the most laid back dude you can come across. In that, he's really everything is done in his own time. He doesn't get flustered about stuff. You can see he's really connected in some way. It's just a totally different experience to what Melly experienced with Sophia. It's powerful.
Yes, and it's many things all in one, Paul. I can talk to you about how when we squeeze a woman during labor pains with the rebozo in particular ways, we're actually putting pressure or certain points of her hips where it's a pain relief point for acupuncture. You know, Mexican and Chinese come together, but also I think it's an amazing feeling of support and childbirth, because you are in so many ways in a different world as you are laboring to bring this new baby. Can be a very lonesome process in a way. There may be people in the room, but you know you're the one doing the work.
Yes.
So feeling a squeeze in particular parts of the body makes you feel supported in a physical way, but our cells, we're so clever. We then take this physical support feeling in our bodies and take it to the emotional realm and say, you know what, I'm actually supported emotionally here as well. So because there's somebody who understands me so well that they know exactly when I'm in the biggest part of, you know, the cusp of pain, and they come and give me a hug exactly at the right moment. So we feel comforted emotionally through this, which talks a lot about how do we go through our own pains outside the childbirth context. You know, what we're yearning for is a squeeze, a hug. And certainly in Ireland, you're not great huggers. You need to learn more about hugs from Mexicans.
No, it was beautiful. But the other thing that was really impressed me as well, Melly used to wrap it around herself when she was carrying Kai. And you could see the way that when, you know, it was like support for the baby as well. And I'm sure the baby felt that support. You know, it was like it was always being hugged.
Yeah.
You know, and then of course afterwards,
absolutely. And
go on, sorry.
You carry the baby with it.
That's right.
As well.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think it's to do with many things again. It's a piece of cloth that from its, you know, from the moment the threads of cotton are being worked on to make it into a rebozo in the south of Mexico, in Oaxaca, the people who make them, they know it's going to go to a mommy with a baby, minimum. I mean, it may maybe go in many places in the world, but it's being built for comfort and support. So it's got that energy.
Yeah.
You know, they are being paid properly for the work, unlike other places where you may buy things and the producer properly. Angelina has been very careful with her contact making rebozos in Oaxaca. They've always been paid properly for their work. In fact, there's families living making a living out of this, um, and the teachings of how to make it being passed down generations, which is very, very important. So this piece of cloth is nearly magical, and it reminds me of the magic that you Irish people infuse in cloths on the eve of St. Bridget's Day in February, right? You leave them outside, so Bridget will kiss it. I think it's a similar way when there was this loving intention put into an object. It makes it powerful.
Yeah, it goes back to what you said earlier on. You talk about the Mexican tradition, you talk about the Lakota, talk about the Chinese tradition, you talk about African, you talk about Australian. Basically, the core thing is all the same. And it's just, you know, the indigenous people still hold that medicine and hold that. To me, the word keeps coming all the time, community. And it's shared down. It's not written in books, it's shared verbally down. The teachings go down to the next generation. Yeah. We've lost that. We've lost that, you know.
We have, but we can get it back.
Of course we
can get it back. And, you know, it's part of the thing. Some people ask me, why should I come to Angelina's workshop or your workshop if I've already learned about Rebozo with, you know, the teachers from the US or the teachers from Holland or the teachers from wherever other country. And I always explain to them, there is a chain of blessings and power that comes with our work, because the whole system from the people manufacturing the rebozos to the teachings of from the source, you're benefiting traditional Mexican midwives. They don't have a pension, you know, they don't have unemployment benefits or furlough in Mexico. So, you know, whenever we respect a loving chain of support that comes from both the indigenous teachers and the tool we're using, the rebozo, the piece of cloth, when you respect and you know, pay fair for those, you are honoring the medicine, and therefore when you use this rebozo to close, to do the cerrada on someone, it's going to have all that power. It's going to have all that love, because it's a chain, a virtuous chain, if you want. It's not the same if you buy a rebozo from China or, you know what I mean?
Made in China, No, I understand what you're saying, because what you were saying is the people that make this tradition has been handed down to them generation after generation. So the blessings of the ancestors and the power of the ancestors is behind that rebozo. And then the intent that they make the rebozo with, that energy it's a magical piece of cloth. That's
absolutely. And you can feel it. And babies feel it. That's why they love sleeping in them or covered by them.
Because I can still, can still see Melly wrapped in it when she was carrying Kai, and I could see how it was, like I'm even doing it now, put my hands under my belly here, how it was actually supporting him in the womb in a way, you know, and like just a long, simple piece of cloth, but as you said, it has so many uses and so much magic. That's and you know, there's a lot of women out there that you've been talking about that can't connect with their babies, that are going through traumas and do things like it's seriously needed.
It is that other technique you're talking about is we wrap the rebozo around the woman, pregnant woman, to help her carry the weight of her belly. So she feels that it's not impacting her hips or her back so much. And we're talking about the last few weeks or perhaps months, because some mommies get really big very quickly, like twins and that kind of setup. So we wrap it around their bodies to help them support. And to be honest, Paul, I think babies are from then on feeling the support of the rebozo. That's why they love it too so much. That's why they love being put to sleep with it all around them, because they have been in touch with that magic from the time they were in the womb of their mommies. And they know the mommies feel better as a result of having this around them. So it's like, it's good for my mommy, it's good for me.
Now that you mentioned that, Kai always sleeps with the blankets really they're really tight up around him. He just kind of catches them like that, and pulls them right around him, and goes to sleep on his belly. Yeah, that's what he does. Yeah, didn't know that now. That's what happens. The other thing you said,
exactly. So for me, it's been trying to work out, to understand in my heart, in my mind, what the magic of this piece of cloth is. To observe as I work on people, what it's doing in the physical, but in the non-physical levels as well. Because then to me became very clear this has to be used on outside the context of childbirth. Childbirth, absolutely 100%, but we need to take this outside that context, because the uses are amazing in trauma and in pain.
There's so many people that need it because there's so much trauma. 100%. I agree with you 100%. The other thing I just want to say to you, because you made I thought was a really good observation the last night when we were talking near the end of the talk. You were talking about the gorse in Ireland.
Yes.
Like, we're Irish. We don't even, we just take it for granted.
We have the gorse because...
Yeah, because of the grief in the country and how you linked it back to the back flowers.
Yes.
Yeah. Just explain that so that people will...
I love gorse. It was one of, it's obviously very eye-catching because the bright yellow flowers are everywhere in Ireland. Yeah. And I discovered it happened when I first came as a tourist to Ireland. I was still going out with my Irish boyfriend at the time, who is now my husband. And we came to Ireland and I saw this bright, then I realized, oh my goodness, it's very spiky, but I managed to catch the scent of it. And it's like, goodness, it smells of coconut. What is this all about? in the height of summer, it smells of coconut, which is kind of weird, but it's lovely. And then, I realized it was one of the backflower remedies. So it's also found in the British Isles because Dr. Bach is from England, right? And I looked into it and I realized it's a remedy for hopelessness and despair. And I thought, oh my goodness. If there is, if you could label the trauma of Irish people or the pain that is shared by Irish people, in my humble opinion, I may be totally wrong, is that, despair and hopelessness because of their history. Simply, I know it's not just Irish people, but definitely felt in people here. And I thought it was beautiful that nature was shouting at you through these bright orange flowers, I'm here for you to help you deal with this. But we're not always listening or paying attention to nature, which is the wisest non-commercial healer, right? She's not trying to sell you anything. She's giving you messages through what plants are growing near you. And if they're growing near you, it's because you need them. So go and use them.
Yeah, because and even the weeds, whatever grows in your locality or in your community, that's the medicine that's needed for that community. And again, I believe we've lost a lot of that. I believe under the plants, Mayella, I'm not talking about herbalists now, but I believe there's another layer here that was in this country and probably in other countries. There's a magical connection with the plants and they're connected to the planets. And it's just for us to create, to remember that and to awaken to that energy. Now, I think we've been talking for maybe over half an hour, 3/4 of an hour. I think
that's plenty for today, Paul. It's been such a pleasure.
So people want to contact you, darling. How do they contact you? They can contact us through Pathway Teaching, of course, as well, and we'll send it on to you. But what's your email? What's your website?
My website, it's in Spanish. It's called yosoygaia.com. That's YOSOY Gaia, GAIA.com, yosoygaia.com. So yeah, Gaia is at the forefront of all the work I do, the Earth Mother. And our email is hello@yosoygaia.com.
Okay.
So we can write it down in the comments.
Okay, we'll write it down. Yeah, no problem. Is there anything else you want to say before we finish? Is there any other aspect of your medicine that you want to people to know about that you think that they may need?
Yes, well, just reach out for workshops on Rebozo, both for the birth workers, for birth workers. We have a workshop coming up in April online with Angelina Martinez, the queen of Rebozo, my loving teacher for this medicine. I'll be hosting eventually in the next few months as well some teachings on the energetic use of Rebozo, so that we can take it beyond the birth room and beyond. So send us an email, and thank you both so much.